Hello and welcome to the Ocean Impact Podcast. I am your host, Tim Silverwood, and our guest on the podcast today is Tom Dawkins, who is the co-founder and CEO of StartSomeGood, which is Australia's leading cause-based crowdfunding platform. He's also a guru of the social entrepreneur landscape and a man driven by making a positive social and environmental impact. One of the things we speak about in this podcast is a campaign that we collaborated on with Austral Fisheries called Seafood for Good. If you've been following the OIO journey of recent times, you would have seen us announcing applications for this Seafood for Good Accelerator and recently announcing that the crowdfunding campaign for the two finalists is now live. Those two finalists are Seeweedery, who have come up with a novel approach to using Austral's prawn waste as a beautiful, delicious prawn oil that can turn you into a culinary star. And the other one, Farmer Meets Foodie, who's creating a really seamless supply chain solution to bring Austral's sustainable seafood to your door. Now this campaign is live, so you can actually go and support both those startups by following the lead from StartSomeGood, but it does close at the end of September. So at the end of this conversation, we actually flick over from the conversation with Tom to talk to Natalie Kalanova, who's one of the founders of Seeweedery. So it's a nice conversation. We go really deep with Tom. He's a big thinker. He gives us a big chunk of information about the state of the world and what he's doing to try and create a positive impact. And then we get to shine a light on the guys from Seeweedery and their novel solution to seafood waste and a circular economy solution. Hope you enjoy this episode. If you do, please talk about it, send it some love, rate the podcast. You know we love that stuff. Thanks as always for tuning in to the Ocean Impact Podcast.
Can't take the ocean out of me.
Hi everyone, Tim Silverwood here from Ocean Impact Organisation, and we're performing another Going Live With, and our guest today will be Tom Dawkins, who is the co-founder and CEO of StartSomeGood, who are a purpose-based crowdfunding platform. So we are going to be talking a lot today about the role of business in creating positive social, environmental impact. I really can't wait to speak with Tom. He really is a brilliant mind, such a big thinker when it comes to all things social and environmental impact. How's things going with OIO? Well, we're now 3.5 weeks into the Ocean Impact Pitch Fest 2020, which means we've really only got 2 weeks from Monday to go. So applications close on the 5th of October 2020. I'll tell you what though, the response so far really has been phenomenal. We are overwhelmed with the applications that have been coming in from all over the world. So we can't wait to share with you who the finalists are after the 5th of October. And of course, the winner will be announced on the 4th of November 2020. And this is really the first of many programs that OIO will be designing and delivering to help people out there start, grow, and invest in businesses that positively impact the ocean. So make sure you tell your friends about it. It's really getting down to the wire now. Not only do you need to get your step 1 written application in, you will also need to submit your step 2, if you meet the criteria, your pitch video, and all that needs to be in by the 5th of October 2020. So a little bit about Tom Dawkins. Obviously he'll be here very soon to tell us all about his passion and all the work that he does. But StartSomeGood, they go back to 2011. And so they've been doing this great work in supporting projects for a really long time. In terms of the amount of projects that they've supported or they've seen funded, 1,107 successful projects have gone through StartSomeGood. So that's a pretty impressive number. And the amount of money that has been raised to support those projects, $11,642,000. So they are a serious player when it comes to crowdfunding, and they really do some great work, as I said before, in shining a light on projects that really are built around creating social and environmental positive impact. So Tom is a bit of a first timer to Instagram Live, so I wonder how he's going there trying to access the feature. It's a bit tricky when you're doing these Instagram Lives because you are required to identify where you can request to join the live at the other end. And once that request comes through, I've obviously got to accept it, and then we can start our conversation. One of the things that we're going to be talking about today in the podcast with Tom is the Seafood for Good Accelerator, which is a partnership between StartSomeGood, Austral Fisheries, and it's supported by Ocean Impact Organisation and Blue X. And the whole idea here was to try and find solutions to fill this gap between Austral Fisheries sustainable seafood. So how to fill that gap between the trawler and the table. How do we open up more channels and more opportunities to get Austral products out there in the market? And it's actually now live. The opportunity for you is for the two finalists, who are Seeweedery and Farmer Meets Foodie. So I'm sure we'll be talking about that once we get stuck into our conversation today. But here is Tom Dawkins. Hello, how are you, mate?
G'day, Tim. Doing good. How are you?
Yeah, really well, thank you. If I hadn't had to shave half my beard off for the half cut campaign a few weeks ago, I might be able to rival that beautiful beard of yours. But no, I've gone back to basics.
Yeah, it's my great achievement of the COVID period.
Yes.
So far. The biggest beard I've ever had.
Well, I think
you've got a serious beard. I've just recently hit the point, Tim, where I feel the need to actually brush it before I do a call like this, and I feel like that's when you know you've hit a certain kind of milestone.
Do you
when you start worrying about it?
Yeah, and you take a certain posture when it comes time to brush that beard. I bet you do.
Yeah. I have all this beard product now.
I was just telling everyone.
And a very unruly dog. I might just let her into the room. I've locked my dog out of the room because she might disturb us, but now she's just outside the door barking, which is not better. So I'm just going to let her in.
Yeah, go for it. Yeah, my dog is still sleeping in a blanket, so can't hear her. But if someone comes to the front door, it will definitely hear my dog too. So it's been a big day for you, Tom. Let's start right there. Big news about the StartSomeGood platform evolving. Do you want to open up with a little bit of a spiel about the new feature?
Yeah, for sure. So today we launched recurring crowdfunding. So unlike the kind of time-limited goal, kind of financial goal-focused once-off crowdfunding campaigns that we've been doing for the last 9 years, there's a slightly different need in the community at the moment as a result of COVID, and just generally as organizations mature, that it's less about those one-off campaigns and more about cultivating that community of supporters that can see you through tough times, help you evolve, and obviously grow your impact. And so something that's been on our mind for a long time, but we really knuckled down over the last few months and built it, and we're really excited to unveil it today. And we already have 10 campaigns that have launched with us today, including some organizations in the kind of social enterprise world that we really admire, like Catalyzer and Need a Tutor and Digital Storytellers. And we ourselves have used it to unveil a new kind of community offering, the Starting Good network, which is kind of a low cost monthly kind of subscription product, recurring as per the new functionality, but which gives people access to all the kind of live events and exclusive content and coaching and other sorts of resources within our ecosystem. So it's kind of like a double launch today. It's a really big day, and I'm kind of excited that we've made it through. Everything's going good so far. Nothing broke, so I'm just beginning to relax a little bit. Just cracked my first beer and hanging out with you, which is a lot of fun, Tim.
Good one. Well, we're appreciative that on such a big day that you were able to find this time, and congratulations on that. Maybe just dive a little bit deeper. So you mentioned it was a COVID creation, but where was the inspiration for this evolution stemming from? Or was someone else sort of pioneered this sort of evolution in the past, or was it a brand new idea for you guys?
No, it's not. It's not a brand new idea. And look, I want to, I want to be honest about it. Kind of think where I personally tend to sit in the innovation kind of curve, which is I don't have brand new ideas, but I constantly scan around the world around me looking for interesting new ideas, and then think about how they might be applied to support the things that I care about, which is in particular helping people take action. Helping people make that step from ideas to action for social change, using entrepreneurial tools. And ultimately the goal of StartSomeGood is to increase the pace of innovation. And so we really focused on the project crowdfunding at first, because that's really the gap, for a lot of, and it's why the program that you guys are running is so important as well. Things that help fill this gap for kind of risk tolerant funding that is willing to invest in interesting new ideas. That's the role that angel investors play in the kind of commercial startup world, but it's been a traditional gap in the social impact world. We kind of have a world that's all VCs and no angels, people, like good people trying to do the best with the resources that they have, but responsible for someone else's money, whether they're a foundation or a corporate foundation or an NGO or a government. And so being as kind of sensible as they can, making doing the most good they can do, but not wanting to take any risks, trying to bat the highest kind of successful batting average possible. And that's fine for things that are relatively mature and have proven solutions, but it's of course not how innovation happens. Innovation requires a certain leap of faith. It requires running experiments. Experiments cost money, and that's essentially the role that angel investors play, but we haven't had that kind of category of investors in the social sector. And so this is a really roundabout way to get to answer your question. So part of what inspired me when I started StartSomeGood almost exactly 10 years ago, incredibly, while living in San Francisco, was the impact. Kind of in San Francisco, I began to understand what a kind of pro-innovation innovation ecosystem looks like, and the really important catalytic role of risk-tolerant capital. And that clarified a lot of my own experiences, having founded several not-for-profits before and tried to raise money for all sorts of, I thought, very cool projects that maybe people hadn't done before, and therefore didn't have a lot of evidence. And so I looked around at who was doing a good job of supporting the new, and I thought Kickstarter were solving a very similar problem in the creative industries, which is how do you get around those traditional gatekeepers? In the creative industries, that was record label executives, film studios and the like. In the social sector, that was foundations and government and kind of high net worths and so on. And we thought, what if we applied that same solution, essentially allowing people to go around the gatekeepers, create communities directly with people who are most excited by or passionate about or interested in the work they're doing? Wouldn't that be cool? And that's what we've been doing for 9 years. But I guess the new inspiration that we have, and look, several years ago, we started really thinking about this and monitoring this, was more your Patreon model, if you're familiar with that. So that's building a dedicated community of supporters, and different types of projects suit different types of approaches to crowdfunding. If you want to, raise a chunk of money to finish a feature film, then Kickstarter is where you would go for that traditionally. If it's a documentary around a social issue, you should use StartSomeGood. But you know what I mean. You'd use that, I need a specific amount of money. If I don't get that, I'm not going to be able to do it. All or nothing. Let's do this kind of campaign. But if instead you want to launch a kind of weekly series of broadcasts that share the stories of social entrepreneurs, which, by the way, is what digital storytellers are raising funds for on our site as of today for their Enterprising Stories program, then you don't just want that one chunk of money. You want a community that's really engaged in that program and is supporting over time. Or if you're offering, a more of a subscription-oriented business, or, if you need the project crowdfunding to raise enough money to buy a food truck and launch a social enterprise food truck, but then you need consistent customers who are going to come every week and buy lunch. And maybe one of the ways you lock in that consistency is through a lunch club as a recurring mechanism. So there's all sorts of ways in which it can be applied, but I guess what it does is orients less around that one-time piece, inspiration, goal, and transaction, and more around that long-term community building in the pursuit of a, long-term impact, which is, let's face it, how real change happens.
And obviously, that meeting point as well, where lots of businesses now are looking at subscription models and how to really build that community, but also lock them in to be able to model out where your business is going to go. Because as a startup, I guess that could be really hard.
Yeah, exactly. And look, we are, it's very meta here because that's also what we're doing, of course. But us introducing this product is us creating a subscription version of our service that is ongoing by helping other people create subscription versions of their service. So hey, I mean, oftentimes what we do is kind of sit in a fairly meta space as a kind of social enterprise, trying to grow the social enterprise sector, helping other people launch social enterprises.
Let's talk a little bit about your community, because you really do stand out from other crowdfunding platforms as being this home of cause-based crowdfunding. So tell us a little bit about your community, and maybe that can be a great way to talk about some of the projects that you've seen come through StartSomeGood over the years.
For sure. Well, I mean, I would say, first of all, that I guess community is maybe not even the right framework for what we've done. And that's the move we're trying to make is focusing more ourselves on building these long-term relationships. It's more been around helping people at a particular stage. And so where we're really focused is helping people kind of take that leap of testing a new idea, getting it out there in public, or growing, something that is early stage but working. And so, that's been, that started with crowdfunding. But part of our mission more deeply is that we think that the best way to increase the pace of innovation for social change is to help more people kind of take that step, to hear more voices, to hear more stories, to get more ideas out there, to give more people the confidence and the capacity to advocate for their own ideas and begin to build alliances and build projects and enterprises that help deliver on those social change aspirations. And the way you do that is not just by creating technology, or essentially by building a tool. And that's essentially the way most platforms approach it. They're like, here's a really great set of tools. Here's the manual. There'll be a how-to guide, which is essentially a manual. And if you can read that manual and kind of figure out what it means and then apply that to the tool, you'll probably do really well. But if you really care about, I guess, getting more people involved, you can't just leave it with the people who are ready to jump in and take advantage of those tools. And so I guess one of our really core principles right from the start of StartSomeGood was trying to kind of essentially trying to, lower the barriers of entry for social change by helping give more people that opportunity, which meant working kind of unusually hard to build capacity, offering coaching, kind of really high touch support. And kind of everything we've done since then has kind of evolved from there. The fact that now 9 years later we're running full accelerator programs. I mean, it's been kind of this incremental set of steps along the way, but it's because, that may seem like a real leap for a crowdfunding platform. I guess it would be if that was, deep in your culture. But in some ways, right from the start, I used to say we're an education company masquerading as a platform. It's not really about, like kind of the way we approached that was to build our own tools and to build our own crowdfunding platform. But right from the start, we were about helping people teach people to crowdfund, not just letting them try. And we've worked really hard on that. But the truth is that also kind of breaks the core principle of a platform business, which is that you need to do it at high scale, low touch. You essentially want to operationalize that platform to the point that the incremental cost of gaining a new whatever it is, a new house on Airbnb, a new driver on Uber, is zero. And then kind of essentially any little margin on transactions becomes highly profitable at scale. And we just kind of like, that's just not who we are, and it's not what we wanted to do. But I didn't know enough about business. I was, terribly unsophisticated when it came to, starting, like thinking about like designing a business model. I'd founded several not-for-profits before with a business model of I'm going to like pitch my ideas to people and convince them to fund them, that had evolved into social enterprises over time without really even realizing it, because sometimes things were hard to talk people into funding and you had to find other ways to fund it. And sometimes the best way to do that was to figure out who really valued it and charge them directly. And so that's, that's what we continue to try and do. And that's led us to kind of over time do ever slightly more, until today, as you were saying in the intro, when I first joined, we're running accelerator programs like Seafood for Good that try and, really, really kind of deeply invest in a small handful of projects. In some ways, the opposite of the traditional platform model, but it doesn't feel like such a leap for us. It's kind of been a slow, logical progression of we want to do more. But in some ways, the recurring giving is trying to rebalance again, so that we can invest in people's capacity, but actually see the benefit of that increased capacity, over the long term, not just through a single campaign.
You've just identified how many little iterations there have been to your business model over this 10-year journey. With this new feature now, do you sort of start to think, all right, I think we've addressed everything now, we should be right? Or do you just always expect there's going to be another iteration and the business is designed to constantly evolve?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think at our heart, we're essentially an innovation agency. And we're just kind of a bit of a hybrid blend of delivering projects on behalf of partners in a, agency style, such as designing and delivering the Seafood for Good challenge, and essentially kind of pursuing some of our own ideas through technology, building platforms and providing programs directly. So we've ended up in this kind of interesting hybrid space. And some days I have to say it feels brilliant, this kind of mix of platform and product and service and B2C and B2B, like working directly with aspiring entrepreneurs and then running programs on behalf of companies that engage aspiring entrepreneurs and so on. On good days, that all feels a little bit genius, that it's all woven together and so on. And other days, it feels completely mad because those are all very different businesses. And some days it feels like it's actually 6 startups, just all happen to be called StartSomeGood in some way, shape or form. So, but I think that is the nature of the game. If your mission is to increase the pace of innovation for social change, I think kind of by definition, there's never going to be one perfect solution to that for all time. There's going to be kind of different practices. And even if it's just different iterations of the same approach, 2 years ago, I never could have imagined we'd be running an accelerator specifically for seafood, sustainable seafood startups that fill the trawler to table gap. I'd be like, what do I know about seafood and seafood startups? But I guess that's an example of how you could kind of, as you develop some of these practices, tools and processes, you can apply them in a variety of different ways. And there's certainly no shortage of of places where I guess application and attention is needed. And so, the end result, I guess, is that we tend to say yes to things if it helps achieve that North Star mission, if it helps engage community change makers and emerging social entrepreneurs so that we can increase the pace of innovation for social change. Our tendency is to say yes, but to almost anything that kind of lines up with that core mission and is with a partner that we want to work with. And, I know that's kind of violates in some ways the core piece of advice you often get and we often give in a startup accelerator, which is, be really focused and don't try and do too many things at once and keep it simple. Exactly. I mean, I give this advice. This is good advice for anyone listening. Like I totally believe in that advice. I just have trouble actually sticking to that myself. And I think that is in the nature of what we're trying to do to some extent.
How does it sort of make you feel, I suppose, and we can go a little bit further back into your origin story maybe as a result of this, but, you take it upon yourself in such a big way here to establish and support this critical ecosystem and structures to drive this social and environmental change. How does it make you feel that that's not being picked up and done by other entities where it should be, that you've had to go and strive so hard to create this? I know you have an opinion about this. How long have I got?
I mean, that is a really good question, I guess. Sometimes, and again, it's kind of a mixed blessing. Sometimes it means that there's these amazing opportunities that I can't believe, from my point of view, are still to be realized. And, while I'm figuring out how best to kind of realize that opportunity, on some level, I'm grateful that someone else hasn't come in and just done a heaps better job more quickly or whatever. Other days it is, I do feel like there's just so much to do. And again, in that tendency to say yes to things and to want to see more things happen, we end up, I guess, trying to do too many roles simultaneously, trying to build out too many different parts of the ecosystem simultaneously. So I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it. I mean, I think in general, there's some of this stuff's hard because it's hard, like investing in innovation is hard. And I think in many ways, it's actually easy when it's commercial, because commerciality all comes down to a very simple set of equations. So an angel investor can just figure out whether it's working or not based on a very simple formula on some level. And that's, that's where you get that acceptance of risk, because you can calculate it very easily. And so that's that classic kind of angel investor trope where you want to invest in, a big portfolio, which is a good insight from angel investors, that no one's smart enough to do 2 angel investments a year and expect to hit winners. No one bats that high. And so I think one of my great learnings, being in San Francisco for a couple of years and kind of observing and dipping in the sector, working in Silicon Valley for an innovation agency, was kind of how refreshing that level of risk tolerance was, that they go into it expecting 95% or so of their investments to fail, therefore realizing they have to be involved in a bunch of experiments. And then the goal is, of course, maybe 95 out of 100 fail, 4 more or less break even, and then you're hoping for one Facebook or Dropbox or Uber or whatever, and it's provided it does 100x. That's the portfolio paid for. And so that's simple, because everything comes down to the same set of metrics in the end, which is, money, profit, loss. and so on. Whereas, of course, it's very, very difficult for a foundation to kind of invest in 100 very, very early stage social change projects, and then a few years later, kind of 95% of them don't really deliver discernible change, don't really work in the way you want them. 4 of them seem okay, but kind of, a bit average at this point. But one of them seems like kind of a profound breakthrough in the delivery of some particular, social service or justice, or, a breakthrough in a particular social dynamic. Does that pay for the portfolio? It's like kind of, borderline impossible to cross-reference. And that's why so much of it does come down to courage. And I do think we're at a interesting point kind of in the evolution of social enterprise, where there's so much enthusiasm, but so much of that enthusiasm is coming from people who speak and think in traditional finance ways. And I think we're at this kind of interesting point where, what is social enterprise to mean, and what is it to represent? Is it going to be the application of more business concepts and business ways of thinking on the work of social change, or the application of more social ways of thinking and community ways of working on the business of running businesses? And I hope it's the latter. But a lot of that does come down to, do we have the courage of our convictions? And because you see that, all over the place. You just have to believe that something is worth doing. And when it comes to, as a society, if we approached solving cancer the way we approach so many other social issues, we would have cancelled that effort years ago, because it doesn't seem to be providing an ROI. But we don't, because we have a commitment to solving cancer as a society. That's just something we're going to keep plugging away at. It'll cost what it costs. We want it to go further. We want to move faster. So there's a relentless need for more money in the hope that we can speed up. But it's not a case that if we don't crack it in the next couple of years, it's all over, guys. We're going to turn our attention to something else. We're just going to keep going till we solve it. And I just wish we had that same level of commitment to, avoiding a cataclysmic climate crisis, solving homelessness, reimagining our democracy, these other challenges that are genuinely tearing us apart, but for which we're constantly, I feel like, nickel and diming the sector. And one of the places in which we kind of often lack that courage. And look, there are lots of counterexamples. I want to be clear. You can pick out, there are heaps of great, courageous people doing important work. It just doesn't add up to enough yet. It's just still very unbalanced in terms of everyone wants to pay for things that are already proven to work, and very few people want to take the risk on trying to figure out if something can work. And ultimately, that's what I love about San Francisco, I have to say, and something that I've tried to embrace going forward, is just this simple change in language, in a way. And I feel like in the startup world, the kind of question that everyone asks is, well, actually, let me start in the other way. In the social change world and funding world, the question that tends to be asked is, will it work? But in the startup world, the question that tends to be asked is, can it work? And that is, will it work is a question that closes things down. It's skeptical. It asks you to prove it. It assumes that most things are not going to work, and asks you to, kind of get me over the line that this is going to be one of the things that will work. And you see it in so many of the kind of ways in which we approach funding and so on. It essentially says, prove to me it will work. Tell me exactly how it will work. Like all these future details. Whereas in the, startup world, it's more, can it work? And it probably won't. But if it did, what could that mean? And that is a generative question. That's a kind of an open-ended question. That's a let's give something a try question. And I guess that's what we, if I was going to go more deeply, that's kind of what we try and advocate for, is we have to try stuff. The only way, it's like any type of, experimental endeavor. You can't fund things that are already proven to work and expect to make progress. You have to fund the process of figuring out what can work. And we need a lot more of that when it comes to, myriad different social challenges, including, life in the water. And that's, why the Pitch Fest is so cool, and why we need lots of these sorts of things. Some of them very focused, some of them more broadly based, some of them at an idea stage, some of them at a growth stage. There's bright spots kind of all over the place, but we need more everywhere, I think, at every stage.
So you speak a lot then about this impact that living and working in the States and in San Fran and experiencing Silicon Valley, and this beautiful attitude towards innovation, and obviously inspired by the angel investment community. Are you seeing glimpses then where that can start to open up opportunities in social and environmental impact? Can the upside of those 5 out of 100 that might succeed be met with these, what have been otherwise intangibles around impact, be it social or environmental? Is there momentum building that can start to
they can almost, challenge each other, the upside of impact versus the upside of economic return.
Yes, there is momentum building, but we all have to hope that it is kind of building on a logarithmic rather than linear scale. If it only continues to kind of grow at the same pace as it has grown over the last 10 years, that won't be enough. So it's possible to get excited year by year by the signs of continuing progress, and they are everywhere, and I am very excited about them. But anyone who's aware of what's going on environmentally knows that we don't have all the time in the world to just tinker away and make slow progress. And sadly, I do feel that we are still a little bit in a tinkering away phase when it comes to impact investment in some of these areas. Again, there's a lot happening, but there's big gaps that prevent it from perhaps meaning as much as it could. Again, too much money by far at the latter stage, and too little money at the early stage. And so the money at the latter stage spends a lot of its time complaining about lack of deal flow, but still being unwilling to invest in the kinds of things that increase deal flow, which is again helping more things at that earlier stage. And so that's why, I said to someone recently, actually, I was chatting to, a big corporate, and they were kind of floating, we're thinking about how to do more. And, one of the ideas that has come up is a big impact investment fund, maybe $100 million fund. And I said, the last thing we need is another $100 million fund. What we really need is a courageous $5 million fund. The logic of big funds is that they can only do big deals, because you're never going to invest, you get this funny logic where people go, you're never going to invest $100 million in increments of 50 to 100,000. And so instead, they just never invest it because they can't find enough deals that are worthy of 2 to 5 million. So you end up in the same player, never investing it. But you could actually just start plugging. How do you eat an elephant? You just start doing deals, guys. Anyway, so I forget. Sorry, it's 5 o'clock, and it's been a big day and a big week, and I feel like I'm rambling and losing track of the original question some of the time. What was I meant to be answering at this moment?
We were just talking about
Silicon Valley.
Yeah, Silicon Valley. Yeah,
and the role that played. Yeah. I mean, it definitely was, just seeing people who just had this completely different approach to, I think, risk and reward and so on, I think was really refreshing. I mean, America's a bit of a mad place, it's certainly not all up. I'm not a fantasist about what's going on there either. In some ways, kind of a scary picture of if you kind of keep playing out some of these trends, where you can end up to, and what you can end up with, which is a society kind of incapable of talking to itself. I do think in some ways, I feel kind of increasingly validated by a contention I had when I was kind of 18, which is that you kind of have to fix democracy in order to fix anything else. I feel like we're seeing that continue to play out. Like we can't make progress on so many of these other challenges because we no longer kind of have the capacity as a society to talk to each other and to make big decisions. And so we spend all our time arguing over the details. What happened yesterday? Who said what? Anyway, I'm definitely off track now, but I was inspired by that. And it made sense to me, I guess, with some of what I'd experienced later as well. It kind of helped me, I think in more systemic senses that innovation is not just an innovator innovating away. It's an ecosystem, and it requires numerous different players, and that risk is one of the key, in any innovation ecosystem, actually, I think risk is one of the key things you have to think about because risk and innovation are, two halves of the one coin. And so one of the things I'm fond of, saying about Silicon Valley is, I think from afar, people can have this kind of slightly mythic idea of Silicon Valley that it's just full of like really smart people doing really clever things and changing the world. And I'm fond of saying actually Silicon Valley is like the world's largest concentration of bad ideas. Like there's just so many people like working really hard on like fundamentally like really suspect ideas. Some of them, even if they worked, and most of them, wildly unlikely to work. But I think what you realize in kind of playing that ecosystem for a while is that it's many of those ones that felt most unlikely to work that when they do work, make the biggest impacts, the things that people are most skeptical about. And so that's where you have to, and the only way you kind of even begin to contemplate them is by asking that what if it worked question, not the will it work, because will it work almost always gets you back to, yeah, probably not. Like if it's trying to, make a fundamental change to the way in which we like book accommodation or move around the city or, deliver healthcare or education or whatever, it probably won't work. Most of those sorts of ideas don't work. The systems are intractable. Change is hard. It's unlikely to work. But if you kind of accept that logic, you never change anything. And so, if you can switch it around and say, what if it worked? You start to go, well, I mean, if it did work, that would that would mean that things were actually different in this fundamental way. And I think part of maybe what primed me to think about that a lot was I'd spent the previous 2 years working for an organization called Ashoka.
Mm-hmm.
And Ashoka is very systems focused. Ashoka actually coined the phrase social entrepreneurship about 45 years ago. The founder of Ashoka, Bill Drayton. And again, it's one of those things where it's not to say that like Ashoka invented social entrepreneurship. They were describing something that was already going on, which is, people using kind of a more entrepreneurial approach, thinking in terms of scale and replicability and systems change, to the pursuit of social change, and describing that for the first time, and therefore becoming the first organization to be able to kind of organize around that definition and bring these people together. And one of Bill's, one of the quotes from Bill that I've always loved, was he said, the goal of a social entrepreneur is not to give someone a fish, but nor is it to teach them to fish. Their goal is to transform the fishing industry. I think that really speaks to, I think as a kind of social sector, we've been good at funding the teach them to fish projects. Here's how to survive in the status quo, essentially. Like teaching someone to fish doesn't actually like deal with the challenge of, are there enough fish there? Who else has the right to fish that place? Is like knowing how to, what kind of pollutants are as it's fisheries, highly interconnected, complicated systems. And simply teaching people to fish is at most only kind of like a 1.0 approach to change. I mean, giving someone a fish might be thought of as 1.0. Like obviously keep people alive, avoid starvation, traditional welfare. Like that's just, you've got to have that safety net. I'm a big believer in that as well. 2.0 might be the teach someone to fish. Okay, now they're building some skills and they can kind of navigate this world as it is and do better. Get a job, complete their education and so on. And there's a lot of important, this is not to disparage, there's hugely important work at that stage. But I think innovation work is that transform the fishing industry. Who gets to fish where? Who controls that? What, how does that connect with other kind of ecosystem management practices and so on? And so I think that really primed me to kind of begin to think, I guess, just that those whole 4 years in the US, 2 years at Ashoka in DC and 2 years working with a kind of innovation for good lab in Silicon Valley and so on, I think really switched my thinking up a level to kind of more systems and not just kind of individual experiences and how you get people involved, more infrastructure systems and what's required. And that's obviously informed a lot of what we do. And it's kind of why in some ways, even though the other part, probably the agency part of our business is the more sustainable and successful, but I'm still kind of, I guess, very personally committed to and fond of our platforms, our infrastructure, and it's why today is such a nice milestone to kind of, sometimes we don't get to invest in them as much as we'd like to because we spend a lot of time doing the work that we're paid to do, which is deliver cool programs that make a difference. But it's really nice to, I guess, COVID slowed down a lot of that, and that was challenging for our business, but they actually created the time and space for us to knuckle down and build and launch this thing that we'd had on our radar for some time, but felt like was particularly germane to this moment. So it's a really nice milestone to take that big step up on the platform side.
When you look back and reflect on the over 1,100 successful projects that have come through the platform, does some stand out that you really look and go, wow, it was, maybe it was your coaching, maybe it was the team support, it was a successful campaign, but are there some that stand out and just go, wow, that really does make me feel proud of what I've built here?
I mean, it's a little bit about asking, like, which of your children are you most proud of? Which of your children did you do the best job of raising? No, I'm proud of all of them, genuinely, but there's lots of, really cool stories. I mean, I think the thing that I'm most proud of is when you can see that it's helping overcome a gap around those early stages, and you can see that it's helping kind of, I guess, catalyze an idea that was there but was dormant, and that maybe the communities or individuals had struggled or would have struggled otherwise to progress in the way they wanted to. So, there's a range of those from the kind of community, from I guess the more kind of traditional not-for-profit through to the social enterprise. I guess one of the not-for-profit ones that really sticks out in my mind is the Girl Academy, which was a school created by the Cape York Indigenous community, specifically to support Indigenous teenage mothers to finish their schooling in a culturally appropriate way. And it's one of those things where it was a locally generated solution, and they knew what they needed, but they didn't have the resources at hand in their community to implement that, and they'd written grant applications and been unsuccessful and knocked back, and had realised that there was potentially another way in which they could approach that and find those initial resources to build that for themselves. And I think that's exactly what we were imagining when we started with crowdfunding, is that it's a tool for democratization, which is to say it's a way for people to get more involved in creating the future that they want. Because democracy for me is not just voting; it's doing. It's how you participate more broadly in creating a better future. And so I love that. On the social enterprise side, heaps of cool social enterprises. One of the ones I'm really proud of is Ability Made, called Ability Mate when they first launched with us. They're a cutting edge kind of scanning technology meets computer aided design meets 3D printing ability to reduce the time and costs of child orthotics by about tenfold, like a genuine order of magnitude leap forward in how this happens. You know, a genuine breakthrough, but you know, exactly as we discussed, the kind of thing that is often quite challenging. They came through our Dream Starter program, which is with ING, where they put up half the needed funds for a given social enterprise, and they need to go and raise the other half from the community, exactly like the Seafood for Good Accelerator we're running at the moment. And so I love that as an example of they were able to, you know, they kind of got that buy-in from ING, came through the program, successfully matched the funds with community co-investment, then was able to use that as a demonstration of the level of interest in their product to get an additional kind of impact investment grant, which allowed them to complete trials, gain their evidence, and since then they've raised a much larger, again, impact fund, because now they've got all the evidence they needed. So you can see that in a way as that increasing steps of credibility and evidence, that it's a great idea and they needed to convince someone, and they got ING on board because the whole program is set up to support great new ideas. They then used that endorsement from ING and the access that gave them to ING's customers and the coaching they got from us and the support and the amplification and the peer-to-peer stuff that comes through crowdfunding to say, look at how much interest there is in this. And that then gave them additional credibility. ING's endorsement gave them credibility with the wider community co-invest. That then co-investment from the community gave them greater community to get that more angel investment summer funds. That allowed them to do, you know, clinical trials. That then was the next level of evidence and data required to get that next investor on board. And that's kind of what it needs to look like, is that as you kind of, you know, kind of fundraising is not this thing that kind of sits out. And this is kind of, I think, what a lot of people don't realize. Fundraising is not this thing that sits outside of, I guess, that pathway of increased credibility. It's not just that you become more credible and then raise funds. It's often the other way around, that you raise funds and that makes you more credible. And so you're seeing that like each funds raised helped confer the credibility or express or communicate the credibility. Sometimes that credibility is actually in social capital, but it kind of gets expressed. The data is the crowdfunding campaign, the ability to articulate what is otherwise an abstract concept, which is people are really excited about this and they want to see it happen, so much so they're willing to co-invest in it. And then there's lots of others. I mean, I definitely want to take the moment, obviously, given the relevance, to make sure we do shout out my two favorites at the moment. The Seafood for Good campaigns, you know, who have had the wonderful opportunity to work with over several months now, gotten to know really well. The two startups that have kind of been selected out of that to test their product propositions are Meets Foodie, testing a transparent trawler to table delivery service in North Queensland initially, and Seeweedery, who are a circular economy kind of oils and sauces maker, who are using Austral Fisheries waste products from their prawn catch to make super delicious prawn oil, which I hear from my foodie friends will elevate any salad.
I've already put.
They're both
my,
on the platform at the moment.
Yeah, I've already put my order in and had a chat.
Me too. I'm really excited.
Had a chat with Elkie. No, so not from Elkie, with Natalie from Seeweedery, whose conversation will be accompanying this when it goes out to become one of our Ocean Impact podcasts. But yes, that's a really good example of where you've been able to partner with a company, in this case Austral Fisheries, to really fill a big gap. So tell us a little bit more about that particular process. Doesn't sound like you'd ever done anything quite like this before with a seafood company. Give us a bit of a glimpse into the timeline and what you learnt from doing this great innovation project with Austral.
Yeah, first time, like long time eater, first time seafood startup supporter. So yeah, it came about through an introduction a couple of years ago with David, the CEO of Austral Fisheries, who, as you know, is like a really purposeful, driven guy. And it's not the kind of thing I ever would have imagined right from the start. But you know, I never would. Let's face it, I never would have reached out to Austral Fisheries and said, "Hey guys, we should, you know, we should, you and us, we should partner. We're going to do some great things together." But I guess someone who knew us both thought that we should have a conversation, and we got together. And I quickly realized why. You know, because he's you know has got this genuine purpose around building a more sustainable seafood company and market industry. and a real tolerance himself for innovation or enthusiasm around innovation. Austral have done all sorts of cutting edge stuff around blockchain and transparency, and have just launched this really cutting edge hybrid boat and all sorts of stuff. And so he got talking about that the gap remained, that they'd made all these investments at the production side, but it wasn't really, they weren't really, in David's phrase, realizing the value of their values. They'd made a lot of investments in being able to articulate their values and live their values, becoming carbon neutral, being able to really have high transparency around their catch, and partnering with, some unlikely partners like Sea Shepherd around that very genuine intention of building. They're both invested in sustainable seafood marine ecosystems. But then there's this gap that it's not quite landing with the community yet. It's been disintermediated in many ways by, the seafood's kind of just going into the general seafood supply and not actually being clearly marked or identified as sustainable catch versus unsustainable catch. So consumers, it's challenging. It's one of those kind of very nascent, I guess, impact industries in a way. Because, unlike, say, coffee or some that are more, like free range versus caged eggs, some produce sectors have gone a lot further, obviously, in clearly labeling the ethics of the manufacturing and helping consumers orient towards the stuff that is better for the environment. Seafood has a long way to go, but an urgent need. You get those guides, that you have to kind of figure it all out yourself. I used to carry around this like Greenpeace guide to sustainable seafood, and it's like a lot to do. You go into the seafood thing and get out your guide, and like you're trying to line up different types of, and like seafood, like often you get some fish might go by multiple names, and so that's a lot. And so, the goal was to try and find startups that could kind of stimulate and overcome that, that could really celebrate sustainable seafood, make it a primary part of their story and their pitch, and attract and grow the number of consumers who would consciously consume and potentially pay a small premium, for that guarantee of sustainability and ethics and so on. And so over a certain period of time, we went through the details of that, and it took a while, as these things often do. But we were confident. It didn't seem so crazy. We'd run programs like this. This was just more specific than anything we'd done before. We've been doing the Dream Starter program for ING for 7 years. And that was for B2C social enterprise startups. So it was much broader. We'd have fashion and food and experience and a lot of health and body products and some homewares and all sorts of stuff. We thought, well, this is similar. It's just super specific. It's still B2C startups, that need to know how to talk to a consumer about values and value and, individual value proposition for the planet and wider society. We thought, we think this is, we think we do, we think everything we teach applies. We just have to hope we get enough of the right ideas at the start. And I guess that was my piece of greatest concern was, it's such a specific niche. Are we going to be able to kind of find sort of unearth and stimulate that niche? But actually, we've got heaps of ideas, not all of which were the right fit for the program. Quite a lot that were kind of maybe playing at more that infrastructure layer, more B2B. Mm-hmm. I guess, providing transparency products and support for companies to be more sustainable, which is cool stuff, but not quite what we're looking for. But we ultimately had 5 really great ideas and companies, or proposed products into the program. Several of them were value-added processes, like turning into jerky or oils, some of which or dog or premium cat food and things like that. Others were, more at that delivery stage with a focus on different markets or different ways of building that consumer relationship. And then the top two that were, wanting to go forward and ready to go forward were the 2 that are on the side at the moment. And so Austral has committed to helping fund and work with them. But now, kind of as we were talking about before, they have to get out there and prove that people actually want what they're offering. It doesn't make sense for Austral to invest in a thing people don't want. And so this is kind of how we approach getting people to I guess, get more risk tolerant. Is in part it's trying to inspire people to just simply be slightly more risk tolerant, more optimistic, more visionary in the pursuit of real change. But partly it's about constructing processes that de-risk ideas. And crowdfunding is a really big one of those, that you can still you can make your judgment call at that early stage. You can be courageous, and your courage can signal to the wider community. But then by making it conditional on that wider community reacting to that, and that entrepreneur showing that they have the personal wherewithal and commitment and ability to get out there and stimulate their market and win that trust and support, if they can do that, it obviously feels a lot less risky for you. So we kind of play with, in some ways, the sequencing that like someone like Austral is able to make that, to take that leap of faith first. But then kind of there's a real world test. We run it through that test, and not every, we have a very high success rate for these kind of programs, but not everyone succeeds. And that's a feature, not a bug. It's meant to be a real world test. And in a real world test, it's like success is not guaranteed. And our partners often say that that's, something they appreciate. Obviously, success is more fun than failure, but if someone's, for whatever reason, not ready, their idea is not quite right, they have to go back to the drawing board and review. It's a good way to find out, and it kind of saves everyone from going too far down the wrong track without getting that, without checking in with the community or their customer base and being like, am I on the right track? Do you really want this?
Good on you.
So that's right where they're at. That's right where they're at right now. And so it's a really exciting moment for them and obviously for us. And we very much would love to see them. Well, I just talked up that from a kind of, I guess, process design point of view, some level of failure is acceptable and okay. Obviously for the individuals, they're working incredibly hard and we would love to see these two succeed. I think they've both got great ideas for things that are much needed in the marketplace. Love circular economy, startups in general. I just love the concept that you can take what other people were thinking of as a waste product and turn it into something that is actually like a source of value and nutrition and flavor.
In this case, delicious.
And deliciousness, exactly. So I'm excited about that, and then that kind of toilet to table relationship, helping reimagine, I guess, the relationship with producers to make it more intimate again, but kind of efficient and at scale, and testing that concept in northern Queensland. So if anyone's in northern Queensland, you definitely need to check out the Farmer Meets Foodie campaign. If you're not in northern Queensland, you can still support them and get some cool rewards, just not actually the seafood delivery.
Good on you. It's a great model, and we're obviously thrilled to be associated with it, because anything which shines a light on how we can do seafood better is definitely in the OIO wheelhouse. So we will be having a conversation when this podcast comes out with the guys from Seeweedery. You can get online and support the campaign up until the 30th of September. Help the guys and shine your own light on what you want to see happening to Planet Ocean. We might wrap things up very soon, Tom, but I thought I might give it over to you for any sort of final words. We're obviously in the midst of 2020. It's crazy times, but I wondered if you wouldn't mind closing our chat with anything that you wanted to talk about today but haven't had a chance to discuss as yet.
Yeah. Putting me on the spot. I mean, I would just say to people that I think, 2020 has obviously been an incredible shock to the system for all of us. And I think that to kind of, go through this, it is really important that we connect with one another and work together, but that we don't lose our focus on not just surviving, and not just retaining what is, but continuing to think about what needs to be. And it's already become, I think, almost a slight cliche. Joe Biden's now using it as a slogan in his campaign, but it resonates with me, and it's really true that we need to build back better. And building back better means innovating, not just replacing what was. That doesn't require innovation. It means rethinking, did we have this right in the first place? The answer is clearly no. And so I think there is a real opportunity here as well, and it's a challenge right now. But I'm very optimistic that if we can get through 2020, kind of, obviously we need to get on top of the current health crisis, which in some ways is that almost like teach people, give someone a fish. We need to just kind of like, give people some safety and security in relation to the actual health challenges of the virus with the vaccine and so on. And obviously the best that we can do prior to then. But then we really need to start rethinking the fishing industry or some of these wider challenges. And I think the more that people can, I really encourage everyone not to kind of put your ideas on the shelf. I know it can seem like a scary, crazy time to be launching something new, but often some of the most amazing things emerge from these moments of crisis, in part because it shakes things up. As a startup entrepreneur, in many ways, your job is to shake things up. Your job is to disrupt the status quo. And so part of the silver lining of COVID is that things are shaken up. Like we don't have to you don't have to work to kind of shake up people's thinking to get people wondering if there's a better way. That's all happening. We're all shook up. And that's an opportunity. If you're someone who's wants things to be different and is invested, if you have an idea, you're a social entrepreneur or aspiring to be so, it's actually a really powerful moment to start working on sharing, refining that idea. It may not be the right moment exactly to launch it, I'm not sure, but it's definitely not the right moment to put it on the shelf either. So start connecting with people, start sharing that. If I could give it just a little shout out, this is part of why we launched the StartSomeGood network. Because we've been so focused on helping people at specific moments. You want to launch something, or you need to fill a funding gap, or invest in an asset. Crowdfund for 30 days, and let's sort that out. You want to invest in designing a launch or growth ready social enterprise, you could join our 10 weeks Good Hustle social enterprise design course, and we'll over 10 weeks sort that out. We'll try and get you. You are trying to launch a sustainable seafood business, join our Seafood for Good challenge for some period of time. But always, at these particular moments, and there'll be kind of people would exit out of our programs. And it's got us thinking a lot about, the importance of staying connected, of being part of community, of finding a tribe, of continuing to stay hopeful, of continuing to stay focused on the future that we all want at this time, and how we could do a better job of supporting our community through these changes. And so we've launched the Starting Good Network. It's a really low cost, $15 a month. We've kept it as modest and affordable as possible, as a simple way that people can connect with each other, be part of an exclusive community of people who have similar values and are on a similar journey, gain access to multiple exclusive events and Q&As with established and successful social entrepreneurs, guided meditation sessions, masterminds with me and others. And so that's at startsomegood.com/starting-good. And it's just one of several, 10 already great recurring giving campaigns. So we're just, if any of the stuff that we're creating and offering is relevant for any of the people listening, of course, we'd be delighted and honoured to help you in any way.
Thank you so much for your time, Tom, and all that you do for the betterment of planet Ocean and its inhabitants. And you go and celebrate after a wonderful day in the life of Start Some Good.
Thanks so much, Tim. It's been really fun to hang out with you.
Talk to you soon.
Chat soon. Cheers.
So very pleased to be having a conversation now with Natalie Kalanova, who is one of the co-founders of Seeweedery. Tell us a little bit, Natalie, about the solution that you've come up with Seeweedery.
So you know how when you buy the frozen prawns at the supermarket, they don't really have a shells on it. And have you ever wondered what happened to them?
Good question.
Yeah. They usually go straight to the landfill, and unfortunately it makes whopping 50% of most of the seafood we're consuming, because we usually eat only part of that, and the best nutritional elements are waste through the processing. So what we decided to do, we decided to replicate the way the chefs work in the kitchen, waste nothing, and make beautiful prawn oil from the discarded prawn shells. It's a great flavor enhancer to any dish.
Love it. So here we are. You've identified a waste product that is causing harm to the planet, and you've been able to turn that now into a covetable product. Tell us a little bit about that flavor and some of the applications for this prawn oil that you're creating.
So that would be, you can literally use it for any seafood dish. You can add it to the prawn linguine to recreate the beautiful Italian dishes, or you can add it to the Asian dishes like laksa, or we've been experimenting with all the different types of the dipping sauces for fish and chips or for the prawns. Worked out beautifully. We just done the testing today with the local oyster shed. Everyone loved the product, and getting really good feedback on that.
Great. So you're part of the Seafood for Good Accelerator, and you've got the crowdfunding campaign live now. Just tell us a little bit more about where you're at right now and where you're hoping to go next.
We're very fortunate to partner with the Austral Fisheries, because even if we identified this wasted product, the seafood processing waste is very hard to work with because of the perishable nature of the product. And but Austral Fisheries, that's the most sustainable fishery in the world, and they are actually vertically integrated into some of the seafood processing. So we're getting these prawn shells in the pristine conditions, ready to transfer the flavor into our product. They've
Right.
been a great help with our project, and we've got our first manufactured sample already, testing it around. Yeah.
So I'm sure some people out there are going, gee, I wouldn't mind a bit of prawn oil from Seeweedery via Austral Fisheries. So do you want to tell us how people can get involved, how they can support their project and become a customer?
We need your support to produce our first batch. So at the moment we are experimenting with the samples, but to produce it we are running the crowdfunding campaign. So if our project resonates with your values, or you just love amazing different sauces and want to try it, so please go to our campaign and support us. Get your bottle and let's start cooking to save our oceans.
I love it. So you can go to StartSomeGood and search for Seeweedery or seeweedery.com.au, where you can find out more. We wish you the best of luck on your journey, Natalie, and thank you for looking after Planet Ocean.
Thank you so much, Tim, for having us. Thanks.